In this video, I'm going to give you some ideas and advice on how to improve your fluency in preparation for the IELTS speaking test. Of course, fluency is a really big part of speaking well in a language, and it is a big part of your overall band score that the examiner is going to give you in the IELTS speaking test. In fact, it's worth 25% or a quarter of your overall score. So it's worth spending a decent amount of time on improving this area of your speaking. It's also quite a difficult area to improve for some students. Some people will struggle a lot with speaking smoothly without hesitations or giving nice quick responses to the questions the examiner is asking in the test. Now, of course, it's normal to have some hesitations in order to think of your answers, but if it's really affecting your fluency, then it's going to have a negative effect on your overall band score. Hopefully the ideas and advice I'm giving you in this video are going to help you to prepare better and improve your level of fluency for the IELTS speaking test, but also for speaking English in general. Now, some of the ideas I give here might seem pretty obvious, and also I might miss some points that you've heard other teachers talk about when improving fluency. And of course, I'm not covering everything here. I'm just covering some useful things that I think will help any person learning a language to improve their level of fluency. So the first thing that I think, yes, is pretty obvious, but also really important, is to speak a lot in English. If you don't speak a lot, then you can't expect to improve your fluency. You're not going to improve your fluency in English from reading a lot or writing a lot. It's really not going to help you kind of improve that skill unless you practice that skill. It's like anything, learning how to play a sport. Well, you don't get better at playing a sport without practicing and doing that sport a lot. You can't read a book to make you better at playing a sport. Of course, when you're learning English, yes, you can pick up vocabulary and things like that from reading, but the skill of speaking and the kind of level of fluency that you have is only going to improve with regular speaking practice. And of course, this can be difficult for some people to find opportunities to speak English. But I would say if you do have opportunities, grab them with both hands and speak as much as you can. And even if you feel like you don't have any opportunity to talk with someone face to face, then try to do some speaking on your own. Yes, it's not quite as good as having someone to speak to face, but it's better than nothing. The more speaking you do, the better you're going to get at speaking. So that's the first thing, and it probably seems pretty obvious. You've got to speak a lot to improve your fluency. The second thing is maybe a bit less obvious to some people, but I think to others this will be very obvious, and really the people it will be obvious to are the people who have quite a high level of English speaking already. And that is to avoid translating from your first language into English. Some people, when they're speaking English, they'll try to think of things in their first language first and then change that into English. And this will cause a lot of hesitations and you'll get stuck and kind of your speech will be produced very, very slowly. It's important that really when you're speaking English, well, you're trying to think in English as well, or even really not think at all and just speak. a lot of people that I've had in the past preparing for the IELTS speaking have this problem. And often it comes from the way they've approached learning English in the past, or the way they learn English in school. And often it's with classrooms that will mix two languages. It will mix your first language with English, and this is teaching you to connect those languages in your head, and kind of really it's not helping because you're kind of focusing too much on your first language that will be very different to the way we speak English. So really what we've got to do here is focus on the language we're speaking and forget about our first language. Yes, this is very difficult, but again, the more you speak, the more you can avoid this habit of translating words in your head when you're speaking in English. But it does take time, and it does take a lot of practice, which takes us back to the first point of speaking a lot. The more you speak, the more you'll find that you're not relying on translating words in your head. Another thing that might help with this is the approach that you have to learning new vocabulary. And this really links with fluency and being able to speak smoothly as well. I feel like a lot of people, when they're learning new vocabulary, will link words in English with words in their first language, and maybe have long vocabulary lists that they try to memorize. And in my view, this is not a good way of learning new vocabulary. What you should be trying to do is learn words in chunks. So you're not just learning an individual word on its own, you're learning English words together with other words. Maybe it's collocations between verbs and nouns, or it could just be whole phrases in English that you're learning. Not just individual words connected with a word in your own language. This is going to kind of make you rely on the knowledge of your own language to speak English, which is not a good idea. By learning words in chunks and being aware of the context of the phrases that you're learning is going to help you to speak more smoothly and not get stuck. And of course, it links to that point before about avoiding translation. Because if you're not learning new English words with words in your first language, then you're not going to be translating. You're going to be relying on your knowledge of those phrases and collocations and chunks of language in order to speak smoothly and clearly. So that's another point. Now, if we move on to the next point, because I think this is something that a lot of students struggle with when they're speaking, especially in the IELTS speaking test. They're afraid of making mistakes and saying something wrong. And this will negatively affect their fluency. So my advice here is to not be afraid of making mistakes, whether you're preparing and practicing, or whether if you're in the actual test, you shouldn't be focusing on the mistakes you're making. You should be focusing on communicating your ideas. If you're really afraid of making mistakes, you're not going to speak as much, and 2, you're likely to make more hesitations and slow down your speech. So really, this is very important to have this positive attitude towards speaking in English and not to be worried about making mistakes. The mistakes are going to be there. Yes, you need to analyze your mistakes and try to improve and avoid making mistakes in the future. But by worrying about them too much when you're actually speaking is not going to help your level of speech. So that's another point. Now, the last thing is something that I think is quite important, and that is to listen to the experts. And what I mean here is listen to native speakers of English and the way they're speaking. and not just listening to them, but trying to imitate the way they're speaking. There will be things about their speech that will be useful to imitate and improve your fluency. These things are things like sentence stress and intonation and just the rhythm of their speaking, that when you're listening you will even unconsciously pick up on these things, and hopefully when you practice speaking you'll be using some of these features naturally when you speak, and it should improve your fluency. So there we go. I mean, really there's some ideas, 5 main ideas there to help you to improve your level of fluency. Now, of course, there are other ways to improve your fluency. This isn't a list that covers all the different ways that you can improve, but I think the main thing really is just consistently speaking a lot in English over time, and the more you do that, the better level of fluency you're going to have. So good luck with your own practice and your own improvements in fluency in the future. Now, I hope this video has been useful to you, and if it has, do remember to click the like button, and if you haven't already, remember to click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any similar videos in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.